Dr. Guzman, welcome to our program.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. I appreciate your time.
Tyler, can you give us an introduction about who Dr. Guzman is?
Sure, I'll try to do you justice. We
Yeah.
have a very special guest today, Dr. Jonar de Guzman, a Filipino American dual board certified physician. His wife is Chinese American. He grew up in an Asian family and later worked closely with Asian and Pacific Islander communities. Dr. Guzman has had a front row seat to the cultural challenges surrounding chronic illnesses, especially type 2 diabetes, which impacts Asians at a much higher rate, even those who don't fit the typical diabetic profile. After losing his own father to an avoidable disease and then his young daughter to complications from cerebral palsy, he left traditional medicine to focus on supporting the Asian community in a more holistic and emotionally attuned way.
Thank you. So, I'm very interested about diet because I always think that we Asians eat very healthy, but we do have very high rate of type 2 diabetic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. So I think, when we grew up eating what our parents, grandparents ate, the actual like recipe itself hasn't changed. What has changed is the proportions of those specific components. Back in our respective home countries, oftentimes meat specifically
Mhm.
was kind of it acted as a garnish. Now that has flipped the script where meat and also stuff that was, for example, like rice, right? Those are much big components of our like main dish than it used to be. So the proportions are off, right? But I think the more important part about this is the modern food system that we're in. There's a lot
Mhm.
of ultra processed foods.
Mhm.
And what that means is like compared to whole foods,
Mhm.
stuff like vegetables, fruits, stuff that you can get from an actual, like not from a manufacturing plant. Those foods are healthy for us, but stuff that is ultra processed oftentimes contains additives that are harmful to the metabolism and to the body. That in conjunction with like the flipped proportions of the foods we're eating nowadays is why what we're eating is unhealthy.
Mhm. So, what about us Asians versus other ethnicities like white people?
Yeah, great question. I talk about this all the time
Hmm.
because if you look at the United States, for example, we Asians make up much smaller proportion comparatively to other ethnic counterparts,
Hmm.
Caucasians, African Americans. However, when it comes to chronic diseases, and specifically type 2 diabetes, we Asian Americans are 40% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes than, for example, Caucasian adults.
Hmm.
Why does that happen? And it can even happen at lower BMIs, which is body mass index.
Hmm.
The difference is the way we put on fat. We metabolize our food and nutrition. We Asians tend to put on higher visceral fat. So you have to understand that there's two main types of fat that we put on store
Yes.
in the bone fat, and that's the fat that wraps around organs. That's actually the much more toxic type of fat compared to subcutaneous fat. That's the fat that we often think about when we talk about fat because that's the fat you can see from the outside.
Yes.
Visceral fat you cannot see. And this is
Yes.
why Asians, though they might look healthy or like not as heavy, they can even develop stuff like insulin resistance that leads to prediabetes or type 2 diabetes or other chronic diseases just by the very fact of the way that we put on this visceral fat. And actually, so I'm Filipino, right? So I'm
Mhm.
Filipino American. Filipino Americans and South Asians, we are disproportionately even higher prevalence
Oh.
than the other Asian ethnicities. Yeah. So me specifically, I'm at the top of the list. Us and Indians were at the top of the list when it comes to this.
That's very shocking because, when I compare to white people, I think they eat things too sweet, not enough vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
But, and it's very easy for me to put up fat in my belly area, and I have
Yeah.
very thin legs. So that looks like a type 2 diabetic. I'm worried about that.
Yeah, sure. Of course. And we Asians should be worried about it. And
Mm,
yeah, that's the difference I'm talking about. So like even though we might think we eat healthy, you really have to look at the components of what we are eating because for Asians, because we can put on visceral fat faster, we have
hmm
to be even more careful as we get older because
hmm
metabolism slows down as we age. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Do you think that traditional healthcare and health strategies in the West are not fully addressing Asian and Pacific Islander health issues?
Yeah, I very much do. And that's why I do what I do because these methods and sort of the management around diabetes, a lot of this was Eurocentric. Like these studies were done on Caucasian body types and
hmm
Caucasian people. And so how can we if the way that we metabolize is different, and especially how we put on visceral fat is different, how can we as Asians expect sort of the same results, same outcomes with the same medications from these studies that were used on other ethnic groups apart from us. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of room to improve with targeting specific treatment modalities for Asians and Asian Americans specifically. So, yes, I think there's a big gap. That being said, I think there's now more nuanced conversations going on in the background that are now coming more to the foreground on how we, as you know, a healthcare um, field, can target specific ethnic groups to help them even, manage better, but potentially even reverse some of these diseases we're seeing more prevalent in Asian communities specifically.
What does Western medicine consistently miss when it comes to Asian patients? You talked about the BMI might not be a good indicator. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I think that actually is one of the main ones because usually for healthcare professionals, there's a trigger for them to be on the lookout for X, Y, and Z. And so what I'm talking about specifically is like chronic diseases. They might not think of screening someone for, let's say, diabetes if body proportion wise, they're hitting the build when it comes to BMI. So that body mass index, it measures sort of like the amount of excess fat that someone potentially can have, depending on the scale that is being used for that person. And so, with Asians, the BMI might be considered normal range. And usually that's a BMI below 25. But when you look under the microscope, so to speak, or like do a body scan, you'll see that the fat actually can't be seen from the outside. It's because it's wrapping around the organs, this visceral
Yes.
fat that I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so then they might miss screening that individual, and it might be a little bit later or even much later potentially that they find out they have diabetes when they could have discovered it earlier on by screening them earlier. If you look at other Asian
Yes.
countries, they use specific BMIs for their respective country. So
Yes.
yeah, that could be a very helpful tool
Uh,
that we implement here in the United States that is not used very much yet you know?
yes.
Yeah. But that would be one good tool. I think like you wouldn't necessarily need to jump the gun and
Mm,
do like full body scans because those are expensive. Plus there's like
mm,
radiation that comes with that.
uh,
But like even just shifting the scale so that
yes.
it's more applicable to, a specific Asian ethnicity would be much more helpful in this
Yes.
regard. Yeah. So yeah, just going back to this whole point of the visceral fat, I
Mm,
think that like because the way that we store the fat, and most likely, there's theories behind why this is the case, but I think evolutionarily wise, like the way that our ancestors, went through evolution, this was like a protective measure for us. This
uh-huh.
putting on the visceral fat, because the thing is, we have to think about this as, if we were Neanderthals roaming the earth,
Uh-huh.
like food sources weren't readily available like they are now. So storing fat was actually like a benefit
Oh,
because in
okay.
times of like not being able to find food, our body could essentially feed itself, right? And so this was a protective mechanism earlier on, but now this is like hurting us. And
Okay.
so the visceral fat being like one of the biggest things that puts you at higher risk for not just diabetes, but high cholesterol, high blood
Yes.
pressure, heart disease. And that's why you see a disproportionate number of folks, for example, even like Filipino Americans, it's not just diabetes, it's all the things that I just mentioned. So it
Yes.
puts us at higher risk for all the chronic diseases and not even just diabetes.
Yes. In
Yeah,
Chinese, we say three highs: 三高, high blood pressure, high blood sugar
high
cells.
cholesterol.
Yes, these three
Yeah, yeah.
highs. Do you think it's because we maybe have longer agricultural civilization? When I studied in China, we were taught
Mhm.
that the Westerners, they were like more hunters, started like that. Their time period of hunting actually lasted longer than us. We started agricultural society very early on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that could have definitely contributed to this very fact. That's
Yes.
interesting. I actually didn't even piece those two together, but that is a strong possibility. Yeah. But we
Yeah.
don't know for sure, right? Like these are
Uh,
just theories that we have, but like they make sense like
mhm.
in the evolutionary like process of like our bodies that like if that were the case, if the hunter-gatherers versus we focus on agriculture, that would make more sense, right?
Mhm.
And the thing I wanted to bring up, like comparatively to, the United States versus, other Asian countries,
Yes.
I'm not sure if you've ever heard about the China study, but
No.
it refers to this very large um, epidemiologic research project in rural China, and by this author from the United States. His name is T. Colin Campbell.
Uh,
And so he like basically interpreted his findings for the public in this study. Okay.
mhm.
So what they did, they looked at diet, they looked at lifestyle, and then disease patterns across several different rural Chinese counties
Mhm.
and compare those to population level like eating patterns
Mm.
with specific health outcomes. So the whole message is that populations eating more whole plant foods, right? You just mentioned the agricultural
Mm.
aspect of, sort of like Chinese
Mm.
and also like
Mm.
Asian ancestors and fewer animal-based foods. They tended to have way lower rates of many of the chronic diseases that I just mentioned. So
Mhm.
high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart disease. And so what Campbell did, he used that to argue that eating mostly whole foods and mostly a plant-based diet is the way to go. I think the important caveat here is that it was largely observational, so it can show associations. This is not a whole like cause and effect thing. Um,
Mhm.
but that's why the book is so influential because um, I think it speaks to the strong point of what I just brought up, how the proportions changed. Remember how I brought that up at the beginning of our
Yes.
conversation? The way that like our cuisine and the proportions of the specific components in the food has changed over time. And the thing is too, if you also look at there's another book and a study called The Blue Zones. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that one, but there's
No.
actually a show on Netflix called Live to 100. And so
Okay.
this book was by Dan Buettner. Yeah, so Dan Buettner, he along with a team of like scientists and epidemiologists, they looked at five different populations around the world that had a higher density of centenarians, people who lived past 90 or 100. And without chronic disease, they were living like very well into their late stages of life. And so they basically analyzed these different societies. One of them is actually here in the United States,
Mhm.
in Loma Linda, California. I'm
Mhm.
I'm based in SoCal, so that's not too far from where I live, but they came up with the power of nine. So there was nine lifestyle factors
Uh-huh.
that they came up with that were common amongst these societies. And guess what? The same type of way that they found the China study, those rural Chinese populations were eating,
Uh-huh.
very much in line with those folks. So it's
Yes.
like a mostly whole food, plant forward nutrition. Hmm.
Yes. My own observation, there is like a northern China, their ancestors are more like a nomadic people. Then there's a
Mm,
southern China that people eat rice eater, and people in north they eat more meat and wheat and bread. And
mhm,
people in the south, especially in Hong Kong, they eat a lot of soup. So longevity is very common in that area. It's just
mm.
my observation. But my question is that nowadays, because the Western influence, a lot of experts in China tell us to change our lifestyle. There are several things they might be missed. I want to just get opinions from you since you are the expert. Number one is about the carb. We have the tradition of eating congee in the morning.
Spongy.
Now they say that it's all carb, it's bad. You should drink milk, you should eat eggs. But milk is not very good for us to digest. So I want some of your opinion on that.
Yeah, this is a very complex answer for this question.
Uh,
So we have to go back to understanding what insulin resistance even is,
yes.
right? Insulin resistance is a disease process that happens, and you see it with pre-diabetics, you see it with type 2 diabetics, right? Pre-diabetics is like the precursor to type 2 diabetes,
Mm,
right?
mm,
But what they share in common is insulin resistance. So what happens in the body is insulin, which is a hormone, it's made by the pancreas, it gets
mm,
released after you eat a meal, okay?
mhm,
The insulin goes to all your cells around the body as sort of a key to unlock the door to
mm.
let sugar from the blood into the cells. Okay. In
Yes.
insulin resistance, it resists insulin, meaning that the key of insulin no longer works. Like it goes into the lock and can't unlock the door. So the door stays shut. Guess what happens to the sugar in the blood? It stays there and just rises, keeps going up and up and up. So this is what happens in insulin resistance. And so when you're talking about eating foods, for example, like avoiding eating congee, you have to understand that eating carbs is, especially if you have insulin resistance, it is a symptom, a byproduct of insulin resistance. What
Mhm.
we're really talking about here is carb intolerance. Your body can't tolerate carbs like it used to. Why? Because of the insulin resistance. So if you can fix the insulin resistance problem, you can go back to eating congee. Congee is not the problem. If you eat the congee and you have diabetes or you have prediabetes, and I'm talking specifically about type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a completely different
Yes.
disease process. Okay. These prediabetes and type 2 diabetes happen because of insulin resistance. If you can fix the insulin resistance, then you can start eating carbs again. You'll become carb tolerant again. And so there's this misconception that we have to avoid eating carbs. No, that's not entirely the case. If you want to be able to, at the very best, manage your diabetes, but or at the very least manage your diabetes, but at the very best, reverse it. The key is removing the inflammatory foods that have caused the insulin resistance in the first place.
Yes.
And oftentimes, this is processed foods and unhealthy fats.
Uh-huh.
Those are the two big culprits.
Yes. Actually, I've been paying close attention to this insulin resistance. I also read that cortisol level
Mm,
can also contribute to this. So some people gain weight because they're stressed out.
yes, very much so. Yep. And you hit it on the head. So, cortisol, for those listening, cortisol is considered our stress hormone. Okay.
Yes.
So during a time when your body senses danger, cortisol will be released, right, by your
Mhm.
body. And this is sort of your body's fight or flight response, right? It's called the sympathetic nervous system. It kicks into high gear because it senses that there's danger.
Mhm.
So what happens is it allows you in the short term to be able to like perform better. Again, going back to like the evolutionary process of like our bodies, like back when we roamed the earth, this was helpful to avoid predators, to avoid like being killed by like, animals, right?
Mm.
But now in modern times, there's all of these external stressors that our body can't tell the difference whether or not this is actually like a life-threatening thing. So alarms on our phones, whether it's emails or notifications, work-related stuff, projects, deadlines, this all builds up. And so over time, that emotional stress leads to high cortisol levels. Cortisol level, if it's elevated over time and it doesn't go down, it leads to high blood sugars. It can cause insulin resistance. It can cause weight gain. It causes your hormones to be imbalanced. So like you crave fatty fruit foods, fried foods, because your body is telling you, hey, we need to store this energy for if we can't find food later on down the road. And so yeah, that's exactly why people who are chronically stressed and don't do anything about it, they can gain weight, they can get insulin resistance, develop type 2 diabetes, and other bad things down the road.
Yes, I am a very high sensitive person, so I'm vigilant all the time. It's like by
Oh,
nature,
yeah.
because on my hearing, my oh, everything's very sensitive. I wonder if you can give me some advice, because I really worry about insulin resistance myself.
Yeah. I mean, you have to look at the couple things that I usually ask people. One, do you have a family history of it? Right? That will give you like a stronger indicator of like how much further at risk you potentially could be to insulin resistance. So if you see it in your family line, whether it's your dad's side, mom's side, or even both, or you have siblings and they've developed it too, but
Hmm.
like don't just look at your immediate family, look at your extended family. If there's
Yes.
like uncles and aunts on either side of the family or both, that should be an indicator for you. Type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, insulin resistance, and any of these other chronic diseases, they are preventable diseases.
Hmm.
Even with us having a genetic risk to it,
Hmm.
we still have a lot of control over it from our lifestyle. So I
Hmm.
often tell people, like, chronic disease is like a gun. The
Hmm.
genetics loads the gun, but the lifestyle pulls the trigger.
Hmm.
And so you have more control over it than you realize. So I think looking at your family history, looking at the sort of things you're doing on a daily basis when it comes to your health habits, nutrition, yeah, it's a big one. It is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You brought up another big one, stress. If
Hmm.
you're not handling your stress effectively and
Hmm.
you don't have a daily practice to help process a lot of these chronic stresses that we have, then yeah, your cortisol potentially could be elevated, leading to insulin resistance and other chronic diseases. The other big one is movement. Like, are you moving your body? Or are you just sitting in front of a computer, on a chair all day long, only to drive home and just sit on your couch and watch TV? Like, are you moving your body throughout the day? And then
Yeah.
the last, but definitely not least, is sleep. Sleep has such a profound impact on our metabolism, and especially when it comes to insulin resistance. So if you are not sleeping at least 7 hours a night, guess what ends up happening? Sleep is your time for your body and your metabolism to like recalibrate and the hormones to balance. If you don't, they stay imbalanced. One of those hormones is cortisol. So it remains elevated if you're sleeping less than 7 hours, 6, 5 hours. Sometimes I see folks that sometimes that when they first come to me, they're sleeping only like 4 hours a night. And there's no wonder why they've developed like, they've put on excess weight, they have type 2 diabetes and some of the other chronic diseases because of this. So you have to be very cognizant of all of those pillars I just mentioned.
Talking about sleep, what time people go to bed, does it matter?
Like in terms of like the time that they go to sleep or for the number of hours they sleep.
The time they go to sleep.
The time window.
Like what time they go to sleep at night.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, so this question and answer is also somewhat complex because there is certain folk that might have a job that is they're like night shift workers.
mhm,
And so I think that this would apply to day shift workers, this
mm,
what I'm about to say. Sleeping in conjunction when the light is out, or yeah, like when the sun is down and the moon is up, matters a lot because the way that like our body and metabolism works, it works on our circadian rhythm clock. And so our organs are all synchronized in like harmony with our daytime waking hours. When the sun is up is when we want to be up.
uh-huh.
So what you want to try to do is figure out a time that works for you that you'll be able to fall asleep with adequate time, those 7 hours at least, to be able to have quality sleep and then wake up when the sun is up. And so I know for folks listening out there, they might have young kids or a family, and so it might not make sense for them to fall asleep too early. Like they have to fall asleep later, and that's fine. But I want to impart, they have to be able to sleep at least 7 hours a night. So it just depends on the individual. Like in our family, we have two young kids. So we're usually in bed by 9. I know it
Mm.
sounds like an old folk thing, but like our parents were right. Like getting to sleep early so you can wake up early. The evidence is showing that that is actually correct. You want to be up and about when the sun is up so that your organs know, hey, it's morning time, it's time to eat. Your metabolism is fastest in the morning time. So it's so important to get to bed at an earlier time if you're like, life allows for that.
Yeah. So that
Oh,
book tells us to get up early and
yes.
go to bed early. But in China or in Asia, we have very busy social life. So nighttime, the people go to karaoke, go have fun. And then after that, they'll still have a meal at night, which I think is not very healthy after a certain time. I wonder if that new lifestyle of neon lights and the busy social life contributed to the percentage of type 2. Yeah.
Very, very good observation. I would say that contributes definitely because I mentioned, a couple minutes ago about metabolism being fastest during the waking hours, like especially in the morning. As the day progresses, your metabolism slows down. And so if you're eating heavy meals later on in the day, or even let's say late at night, like you go karaoke, then you guys go to a late night restaurant, your body can't process that food like it could in the morning. And so what ends up happening is if it can't process it and it's in your body, guess what it gets stored as?
Yes.
Fat.
Yeah.
And so in fat being like two types of fat, right? It's not just the subcutaneous fat that we can see from the outside, visceral fat too. So over time that adds up. And so yeah, that probably contributes to it as well.
So, do you know who are more healthy, the Asian Americans here or the Asians in their own Asian countries?
Yeah, so if you asked this question like 10, 20 years ago, the
Uh,
answer would be very different.
uh-huh.
My answer like 20 years ago would be Asians over in Asia are more healthy than they are here.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because of modern life and globalization, our American way of living has spread to other countries and has spread to Asia. And so
Uh-huh.
now these Asian countries are catching up when it comes to these chronic diseases, you know?
Yes.
China specifically, and then also India as well. But like the other countries, like Philippines, Japan, like you're seeing like an explosion of chronic diseases over the past 10, 20 years because of this globalization aspect of things. So to answer your question, like Americans, I would say on average probably live way unhealthier than other populations, but other countries are now catching up. And it's not even just Asia, like Europe too, everywhere basically. Yeah.
You touched on sleep, food
Yeah.
proportions, and stress.
Yeah.
What are the other unique ways that you encourage people to address insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes?
Yeah. So with stress, there are specific ways even within that to manage. Okay. And so what this means is like you don't have to sit on a meditation cushion for like 2 hours at a time or go to a yoga studio and have like an hour and a half session daily. What this even requires is just you to be able to do things on like a micro level, having these micro practices every single day, just being consistent with it so that you are sort of like chipping away at some of the emotional duress or even the stress that you are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So you really have to get granular and figure out like what works for your real life, okay, when it comes to stress management. But the other part too that I didn't mention that much about was like the movement, like moving your body throughout the day. Like I brought up like the China study, I brought up, the blue zones. One of
Mm.
the other big components is that those folks move throughout the day. It's like built into their way of living, like their professions, right? Some of them are like field workers or they do work outside the house. And so like our bodies as human beings, we were meant to sit in a chair and sit in front of a computer screen or like sit at our desk for like 7, 8 hours at a time. Our bodies were meant to move. And so what I try to like impart on folks like with insulin resistance is they got to do the same. Even if they're sitting at their desk or
Hmm.
they can't leave their office, moving their body, getting up, doing something like air squats where you can literally just get up from your seat and like move up and down for like 5 minutes. It just takes 5 minutes. And that alone can help to increase your metabolism, get your blood sugars under better control, than if you sat for 7 to 8 hours at a time, you know? Or if you can't even get up from your seat, you can lift each leg up and do heel pumps where you pump your legs back and forth. And that can help with blood flow. So,
Hmm.
and there are studies that have shown a benefit for people with insulin resistance. So, building in these practices so that they are built for modern life.
Yes, talking about movement, I'm
Yeah,
just wondering what type of exercise would benefit people like me. I'm lazy. I'm also like menopause.
yeah,
Should I do Tai Chi or should I still keep doing cardio?
yeah. The thing is, so if you're talking about insulin resistance,
Mm.
You know, walking is a very underrated exercise. And you don't have to go to a gym. You don't have to like run, sort of like at a breakneck pace. You can literally walk for 30, 45 minutes, every single day. And if you
Hmm.
can't do it for a full chunk, split it up 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, 10 minutes in the evening. That is better for you than doing nothing at all. I think people get into this mindset of it's got to be an all or none thing. I got to do like, zone two cardio for X amount of minutes or like at least an hour and a half. You don't have to do that. Like, be practical, do basics, like get the foundational right, move your body every day, even if it is just walking. You know, for example, there is a client that and I'm still working with her, but in our first 3 months, she came to me very overweight and she had pre-diabetes already. She also had a lot of like things happen in her personal life. She lost her husband, single mom. And so when I started helping her, she never stepped foot in the gym once. Guess what? Just by specific things, she changed her nutrition. She started to walk more, right? And she wasn't walking like an hour, maybe like 15, 20 minutes. She lost 40 plus pounds in 3 months. And she reversed her prediabetes. She's now normal. Her A1C is now normal again. So we're working on other things now, but I'm stressing the point that like the movement doesn't have to look like you're like a bodybuilder or you're training for like an ultra marathon. No, you just have to move your body more than you were previously. That's all that it takes.
Yes, it's a burning fat. So to burn fat, you need a fuel. The fuel is your energy. You feel motivated to walk, to
Yeah,
So I think you brought this fuel to your client's life.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, for
very
sure.
good. In Chinese, five elements would say you brought fire. So the
Fire,
fire
yes.
element to
Yeah,
her.
yeah, yeah, right, right.
I have a question about cholesterol. So some
Yeah.
people say it's bad, you'll get heart attack or something. You have to be very careful. But I also hear some other experts say we need the cholesterol. Actually, we should not worry about it too much.
So my stance, especially when it comes to insulin resistance, my stance is you got to stay away from the unhealthy fats. And the unhealthy fats being saturated fat, cholesterol, and trans fat. Trans fat is man-made fat. We, manufactured that type of fat, which is less prevalent nowadays, but it still exists in our food systems. But the saturated fat and specifically the cholesterol, those are often from animal products. Now, I'm not saying to not eat them at all. You can, but I think we have to eat them in much lower amounts than we already are. Like, think back to our conversation about our ancestors, right? They were eating animal-based products as sort of like a sprinkling, a garnish to
Mm,
their overall food. And so going back to that way of eating is very important. So
mm,
I think, yeah, my take is that for myself, even
mm,
like I've moved away from eating those things. And I grew up Filipino. Filipinos, our culture and diet is very meat heavy
mm,
nowadays.
mm,
Before it was not, right? But nowadays, very meat heavy. And so for moving away from that, like, yeah, I've experienced normal levels of cholesterol. Like if you look at my body right now, you wouldn't think, oh, he was 40 plus pounds overweight. I
wow,
was during medical training. And
wow,
so I experimented with different diets over time. I did ketogenic diet. I
uh-huh,
even did a 100% vegan diet. But
uh-huh,
I realized like both of those extremes don't work out in the long run for various reasons. Keto, like I was just talking about with the unhealthy fats, that requires to eat a high protein, high fat diet. I was able to get some results with it, but at the same time too, I got what's called keto brain fog. Like I just couldn't think straight. And I think part of that was the circulating fats that were like causing that sort of disruption in my metabolism. And it's only until I moved away from that and started eating more plant-based, not
uh-huh,
100%. Like I did 100% for a while, but I moved away from that because culturally, it's hard to do in our respective Asian cultures to completely get rid of that, right? So like I think culturally speaking, that makes it hard to do. But finding your like middle way, like there is an area between those two extremes that you can find that can still work for you and for your health. You don't
mhm.
have to throw out your heritage altogether. Your health and heritage can like exist in harmony.
Yes. I just feel like the people here in America, growing up in America as a minority, sometimes I feel pressured to assimilate, and then they
Mhm.
would rather get rid of the good stuff to choose the fast food to make them look
Mm.
more American. Actually, it's not that healthy. So what about some people tell us like you can eat all meat, the carnivore type of extreme diet to lose weight? What's your position on that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with food, especially as it comes to food, I've realized and come to understand that a lot of people take on a very religious attitude towards this,
Okay.
you know? And
Uh,
and religious meaning like religious like, not like
uh,
it's a part of their religion,
yeah.
but they're so adamant about eating a specific way.
Yes.
It's a free country, a free world. You do whatever you want. But I know the data. I'm trained as a doctor. I've looked at the evidence. I've done it for myself. I've done it for other clients. I know what it looks like when you eat the way that supports overall health. And so going to your specific question, carnivore diet, there's certain elements of it that I would agree with, like moving away from processed foods for sure. Like I think that's one thing that everyone can agree on. Like processed foods are no good to the body, right? But eating a meat heavy diet, this is an extreme form of like ketogenic diet. And so I would caution against it.
Hmm.
Because the thing is, with those animal fats, not only does can it lead to insulin resistance, but it leads to high cholesterol. It can
Hmm.
lead to even heart disease.
Yes.
And I've seen that happen in many folks, not even just patients and clients, but like I've seen it happen to family.
Yeah. Yes. So what about the oil? Now it's a big debate about seed oil.
Yeah, I think that the data is still somewhat irky about like the support of just cutting out all seed oil.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain seed oils that, yeah, you still shouldn't, you should shy away from, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think overall, like there's specific ones that, we continue to eat in the house, which is, extra virgin olive oil.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, outside of that, I would say like technically oil, cooking oil is a processed food. And
Okay.
overall, like if you are to move towards more healthy eating, staying away from any oil. You know what
Okay.
I'm saying? Like if you're going to use oil, like use it very sparingly. I think that's what matters more here than the actual oil choice itself. But,
Yeah.
relatively speaking, like I would stick with oils that are higher in omega-3 fatty acids, and olive oil being at the top of the list.
But you see, in places like China, people use a lot of cooking oil. Virgin olive oil from Italy is very expensive. So I see them use like vegetable oil, canola or corn or peanut, even soybean oil. And then I read these things are all very unhealthy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I don't
Okay.
disagree with that at all. I would move away from them if possible, if at all possible. Find other cooking methods that you can still make that food without, using the oil or nearly as much oil, is what I would say. Yeah.
Tyler and I have been competing for asking questions. I want to just give him some time to ask
Yeah,
questions to catch
sure.
up.
Sure. Do you think that Asians have a unique vulnerability to insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, I do. And I think really, again, it just comes down to the visceral fat. I think that the way we put on visceral fat compared to other populations is way faster and quicker. And so because of that, it puts a much higher risk of developing insulin resistance as well as high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart disease at even earlier ages. And so we have to be extra careful about that, regardless of like where we are really, because it's not even, a United States problem. This is like a genetic risk factor that all Asians carry. So wherever you are living, you have to be much more careful about this if you are Asian. And within the Asian, ethnic subgroups, like I said, South Asians are actually at the top of the list. And then the next ones are Filipinos, and then just so on and so forth. But like, regardless if it, whether you are South Asian, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, we're all at risk of putting on visceral fat faster. So yeah, you got to proceed with extra caution and ask your doctor to screen you if you fit the age. Yeah.
How do you address that visceral fat? How do you detect it? And how do you find those early warning signs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Right now, we don't have great ways of testing that, like in terms of like a blood test, right? The way that we can do it is via scan. And that scan is like a body scan. It's essentially like a CT scan, but that comes with not just the cost, the financial cost, but also the radiation. And so that's our best way of like determining like if there is visceral fat, like how much visceral fat is existent in any specific body. That's like our way of checking, but that's not considered a standard of care screening tool yet. And
Hmm.
so but like, that being said, you can go to a place and get that done at like a non-medical sort of office, like not a clinic, right? Like they have locations where they do these sorts of body scans that you can pay out of pocket for. And insurances don't cover it yet. But yeah, it's more of like an out-of-pocket cost. Now,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead. What were you gonna ask?
Because I do my physical checkup in China too, and
Mhm.
they always tell me, "Oh, you have like fatty liver." I wonder
Mhm.
how they found it.
Yeah, I mean, they that specifically,
Uh-huh.
there are blood tests that you can do to
Oh,
check for fatty liver.
uh,
But with your question you asked, it was more about just visceral fat in general. There's
uh,
no good test for that. With
okay,
with the fatty liver, there are
uh,
specific enzymes that come from the liver that you
okay.
can test to see like if they're elevated. And if those are elevated, then that can give you a better indication of someone who does have fatty liver. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Would you say that it's more crucial for Asians to be careful about their lifestyle and their diet?
Yeah. I very much so. Yeah, I mean if I didn't, I wouldn't be such a strong proponent of, being a voice for other fellow Asians that might not otherwise know about it, you know? I think it's complex too because what we see growing up is we see what happens to our family and our friends that are Asian, right? They're all getting it. And so you end up thinking, oh, well, this is such a common thing, then this is just normal. But this is not normal. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. And so I think for any Asian listening to this, their like radar and detector should go up after listening to this and do like an evaluation of themselves. And yeah, get checked by their doctor. Get screened if they haven't gotten screened yet, because once you get diagnosed, and I'm talking specifically about type 2 diabetes, your body is kind of on a time clock. Like if you don't do something about it. And the thing is, with our Western approaches nowadays, with the medications we have, if you don't change your lifestyle, this only gets worse over time. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. These medications are at best help to just stop the progression.
Like a metformin?
Any of them,
Uh,
metformin, glipizide, insulin, like the injectables. So at best, it helps to stop the progression.
uh,
But at worst, things just get worse.
I see.
Yeah.
Do you see your approach as replacing Western medicine or enhancing it by adding on top of it?
Very, very good question. I think it is enhancing, not replacing. The thing that I also want to impart here is like I am not against Western medicine. I'm not against medications. I'm not getting supplements either. Okay. I was trained in this. This is what my bread and butter when I did practice clinical medicine. Like I got trained as a doctor to treat these diseases. There are medications that are life-saving, and in certain situations, medications are necessary. Like for example, there's a guy that I worked with not too long ago. He has had diabetes for almost 20 years. And fortunately for him, and he's Japanese American, fortunately for him, the medications he was on, the three that he was on, helped to stop the progression. And so we're able to like reverse some of that around. He got his A1C down to almost normal levels and off one medication down too. So like had he not been on those, who knows how long he would have had to live,
Yeah.
right? Because this can cut your life short. So I am in no way against medications or supplements. I think the thing that I'm against is our society. There is this sort of movement like right away, like we want a magic pill. We want something that's going to cure this right away. We want the biohack. That when it comes to chronic diseases, unfortunately, there is no surefire cure, quick pill that's going to rid you of it overnight.
Yes.
Your body got this way over years and years. To expect change overnight is unrealistic, I would say.
Yes. I
Yeah.
think this is also the Western medical system's missing point because when it comes to chronic disease, sometimes I feel it's necessary to use alternative ways like herbs or
Yeah.
traditional Chinese medicine. Because you are trained as a Western medical doctor, it makes you even more credible because you
You.
know both.
Yeah. Thank you. I totally appreciate that and I received that. I I think that we are also, this is the way that we think as humans, and especially here in the United States, in this modern life we live in, like you have to pick one side or the other. No, that's not true. Both can exist in harmony.
Yes.
You do both. You don't have to pick one side. We live in this like polarized society where like you either you do supplements and kind of natural ways or you just stick to what. No, you can get the best of both worlds.
Yes.
Okay? And they can exist in harmony.
Yes. So I always want to confirm if I understand it correctly.
Yeah.
If we eat as sweet as white people do, if we eat as many as hamburgers and fast food, might be more damaging for us as Asians than to them. Is that right?
Yes, I would say damaging in terms of expediting the
Uh-huh.
disease. Yes. I think that, in the numbers show this, right? Like diabetes, Asians disproportionately represent those with diabetes way higher than other ethnic groups. And, high cholesterol,
This is a very beneficial. I wanted
Yes.
to tell my kids what I learned from you today. So that
Oh,
would be like a really powerful persuasion because you are an expert. I also want to know, you give us so much information, and what about our audience? How can they be in contact with you, or how can they get help from you? You are based in LA, yeah?
yes, based in
Mm-hmm.
LA. My health coaching practice is virtual. So I see
Mm-hmm.
folks from all over the United States, all the way from like the East Coast, New York, Georgia, all the way to the Midwest and even the West Coast. And we recently opened it up to Canada. So I have folks up in Toronto, it's some folks in British Columbia. So I've even opened it up to Canadian folks. Now, the way that like people can reach out to me, there's a couple ways. One is I have a website called For Truth Health. That's the number four. And
Uh-huh.
then word truth, word health, no spaces.com. You can reach me that way and read more about like my company.
Uh-huh.
The other way is I'm very active on social media. So across Meta, so that's Facebook, Instagram, as well as on TikTok, I go by the username reverse diabetes doc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can reach me there.
I just think because right now I feel we have to be very careful about what information we receive because the capitalists they have their interests in many things. They want to
Yeah.
control many things and they want to keep people dumb. For these type of very precious information, I think sometimes it's difficult to reach out to the masses. Only smart people can get a hold of this type of information. A lot of people are still living in a life that heavily controlled by the media. Their
Mm.
information is very limited. Today, I feel very happy because I ask all these questions. Some are myths, some are misconception, and I'm able to get the answers from you.
I'm very happy to have answered your questions and spend time with you both. You both clearly are care a lot about Asian health and also getting yourselves healthy and spreading that knowledge to other folks and to your kids. So I applaud you for that. And thank
Yes,
you for like allowing space to be able to do that too. I
yes,
appreciate that.
yes. But let me just end this with a light topic. Mhm. How about you, Tyler?
For us, we both love healthy foods. This has been a very fun topic for us, and
Yeah.
we enjoy having homemade
T-shirt.
vegetable stews, and I make tinctures out of herbs, and
Oh wow.
sometimes just foraged from the forest,
Oh
and
wow. That's awesome.
alcohol. So I make homemade tinctures, and
That
we enjoy those together
that's amazing. Where are you guys living?
in Houston.
Yes.
Houston. Okay, so you guys are in Texas. Okay, great.
Yes. So, like white people, they age relatively faster
Yes.
because their skin get aged faster than us Asians.
Yep.
But when Tyler goes out, people would think he's younger than his age because he doesn't have wrinkles. I think maybe that tincture and that he likes herbs very much. Maybe part of it. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah. That's very possible. I mean, the thing is, what we put in our bodies, whether they're herbs or healthy foods like you guys enjoy, that creates like a plethora of food that nourishes the body and heals the body, keeps it young. It leads to longevity. So I think there's probably some recipe to success from the way that you guys are just eating alone, eating healthier foods. I think that supports long-term health, regardless of what that means. Skin health, but like inside the body as well. So that has to contribute to it, I would say.
Mm. So when we read about your bio and learned about what you're doing, we got very excited because, I think a lot of people will be like us, want to get this type of information and want to get that type of help. Thank you so much for accepting our interview.
Yeah, thank you. And let me know when the podcast, the episode is going to air. I don't know if you guys have Instagram or Facebook, but like, we can friend each other so that we can
Yes,
help promote it too.
yes, yes. We'll do that.